Hello and welcome to the Dynamic DNS portion of this course. If you've been following this course in order and you just watched the last video, we're at the point now where we can access devices on our internal network from across the internet by using port forwarding. By simply typing in our external IP address followed by a port number, our router will take any internet user to one of our internal network devices. Okay, well this is all well and good until the inevitable happens. And what's the inevitable? Well, as we know, DHCP addresses have a way of changing. And if the external IP address that we're receiving from our ISP is a DHCP address, it more than likely will change as well. I personally have seen my IP address change several times in a single week. So if we're on travel for a week or two and we decide we'd like to access something on our home network from across the internet, and we use what we thought was our external IP address, and it suddenly has changed, what do? Well, assuming that there's no one at our home residence who can do a quick lookup for us on one of the What's My IP Address sites, who can we contact to figure out what external IP address to use? Well, despite our ISP, who is not likely to give away any IP address information, the only thing that knows for sure exactly what our IP address is our router. So, how do we contact our router? Well, if we don't know what its external IP address is, we can't. So, how do we get the information we need to access our internal network? Well, this is where Dynamic DNS comes in. Why do they call it Dynamic DNS? Well, they call it Dynamic DNS as opposed to Standard DNS. And as we know, what Standard DNS does is it matches up a single domain name to a single IP address. So if we type in a domain name into our browser will do a lookup against one of these top-level domain servers. If one of them can resolve that IP address, it'll send that site back to our browser. And if they can't, they'll forward it back down to some lower-level domain servers who might be able to help. Eventually, if what we typed into our browser exists and it has an IP address, that IP address will be returned to our browser and we'll be able to look at that site. And this all happens transparently in the background so quickly most people are not even aware it's happening. But we're not really typing in a domain name, are we? We're just trying to type in an IP address. And unfortunately, we don't know what that IP address is because it's changed. So what a dynamic DNS service such as www.dynDNS.org does is it uses updaters to keep track of IP addresses that change periodically. And luckily, our router contains just such an updater, and this updater can alert the Dynamic DNS service every time our external IP address changes. So what we do is we create an account for ourselves with one of these Dynamic DNS services. And the Dynamic DNS service will provide us with a username, a password, and a host name. The host name will typically look something like this. Your account, whatever you choose in here, as long as it's available, .dynDNS.org or dynDNS.tv or something like that. Once our account is created, we can then enter that account information into our router, which will enable our router to log on to the Dynamic DNS service and provide it with updates every time our IP address changes. So now, anytime anyone types in our host name into a web browser, that domain lookup will more than likely go to a top-level DNS server, which will have no idea what that IP address is, but it'll recognize dynDNS and forward that request to dynDNS. Well, guess what? dynDNS, which is being updated by our router, knows exactly what IP address to forward this request to. It then forwards this request to whatever our external IP address is at that time, and boom, there we are. From that point on, we no longer have to be concerned with what our external IP address is. All we have to do is remember our host name, and we can access our internal network from anywhere in the world from across the internet.